Let's talk a little bit about scrolling. So part of the beauty of designing for screens is that we can have more content than what fits on the page at any given time. So in this example, I just have an iPhone 16 frame. I do have auto layout turned on, so this content rearranges dynamically. And this list down here actually runs off the screen. Right now, this content is clipped. You can see that down here under my layout settings. If I uncheck that, you can still see the bottom border of the screen, but then you see the content that runs beyond it. I'm going to make this a little more obvious by adding in some additional cards, just so we have even more content running off the page. And I'm just using I've added in the Material 3 design kit to this file, just to make building out this wireframe a little bit faster and a little bit easier. And so it's not quite as ugly as I'm doing this demo. So you can see when I drag that in here, it dynamically moves everything out of its way. It does have to be in the iPhone 16 frame. I'm just going to move this down below there. And then I'm going to make a few copies of that so we have a few different cards running off the page. So right now, by default, scroll behavior is set to no scrolling. And then if I open up a preview of this, you'll see that if I click and drag, I cannot see the content below the bottom of the screen. If I switch this to vertical scrolling though, and I either use my scroll wheel or I click and drag, you can see that the prototype allows me to scroll up and down the page so I can see the content below. Now, this actually works for any frame. So that prototype setting right now is set on the iPhone 16 frame. We could go a step further and apply that to frames within the iPhone 16 frame. So just as an example here, let's pretend that this carousel here, we want it to run horizontally a little further. We want the user to be able to scroll left and right on this. So I need to add some additional items in here. Because this is a instance of a component, I first have to detach this to edit things in here. So in my design tab, I'm going to detach this instance, which tells Figma, hey, I don't want you to treat this as an instance of a component anymore. So you can see this carousel is an auto layout frame that is laid out horizontally. If I just duplicate this last item a few times, you can see that it is shrinking the content to fit within this frame. And that is because on the carousel auto layout, the width here is set to fill. Instead of having this set to fill, I'm going to have it a fixed width. So I'm telling Figma, hey, I actually want this to be exactly the size that I'm telling you it is, and I don't want you to change that. So then if I increase this, you see that the content is running outside of the page, but this still doesn't really look how we want it to because our iPhone 16 frame is centering content horizontally. We actually want this moved over to the left so that the whole first item is shown on the page and then the user can scroll left and right. The other thing here is I still can't change this to scroll on the page. So if I set the overflow to horizontal, you see I get this error that says, hey, in order for the user to be able to scroll on this, the content has to be bigger than frame that it's in. And because the content in here is the same size as the carousel frame, there's no scrolling that's going to happen, even though the carousel frame is larger than the iPhone 16 frame. So what we have to do is actually throw this in another frame, and this is going to fix both of our problems at the same time. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to frame selection. So you'll see that I have nested the carousel frame inside this new one. I'm just going to name this horizontal carousel container. And then this, I'm going to make the width of my screen. So this frame is horizontally centered in here, even though the content within it is overflowing on the right. So now I can select my container, set the overflow to horizontal scrolling, and now you can see this is overflowing here, but in my preview, I can scroll left and right on that container, and I can still scroll vertically throughout the parent frame, which is that iPhone 16 frame. So you can really think about how to get more dynamic interactions and how to include more content than what fits on the screen while still having an aesthetically pleasing layout. You just have to make sure that you're signaling to the user that they know they can scroll either horizontally or vertically on the content.